People have this idea that they'd rather put their head down and do the work than talk about it, but talking about your work is an essential part of work.
You gotta pick yourself up, go backwards, and slam yourself at the wall like 500 more times until the wall crumbles.
25% of middle school girls already believe they'll never achieve their dream career.
Hi, I'm Goldin, founder and CEO of Hint. And you're listening to Unstoppable, a podcast spotlighting the journeys of inspiring entrepreneurs. I believe that at its core, leadership is about constantly learning from the people around you, and I'm so inspired by the conversations we're having in our upcoming episodes and can't wait to share them with you. This season, some of my guests include Rebecca Minkoff, fashion designer and founder of the Female Founder Collective, Diana Kapp, author of Girls Who Run the World, Andrew Dudham, founder of Hims, and Eugene Rem, co-founder of Rumble Fitness, and much, much more. Plus, we ask the $1 million question, what does it really take to be unstoppable? Let's find out. Hi, everybody. It's Kara at Unstoppable, and I'm so excited to have Meredith Fineman here. Hi, Meredith.
Hi, it's so lovely to see you. And I guess if you're watching this video, seeing all of you. But yeah, I haven't seen you in a minute, and it's lovely to see your long red hair and face. So,
where are you right now?
I am in my apartment in Washington, D.C.
It's a very nice apartment, actually. I'm excited to have video here where I can see you.
I have my
background. It's very beautiful. Well, Meredith, as maybe you could tell, I've known Meredith for a little while. We're both part of this incredible group run by two women, Rachel and Glynis. It's called The List, and we met on The List, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I'm guessing.
I think longer. I would have to look into our emails, but it's been a minute. Like, I've known you for a minute.
Yeah. It's super fun. So anyway, a little bit about Meredith. So Meredith is an entrepreneur, a writer, and media expert. She's the founder of a group called FinePoint, which is this incredible group about leadership and professional development. And basically looking at individuals, mostly working with CEOs and senior leadership, founders and women in positions on how to actually speak more about you and your company. And we'll talk a little bit more about Brag Better as well. But she's done lots of amazing stuff with Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Fast Company, and Elle. So you may recognize her name. She also runs workshops that you should definitely, we'll talk about where to find Meredith, but you should definitely check out her workshops because they're super helpful. And now we're here today to talk about this new incredible book that's coming out in June called Brag Better, and I'm so excited to have her here. So let's just talk just for a few minutes about, so first of all, FinePoint, like how did you get started? How did you decide to sort of jump in to actually founding this group?
Thank you for that beautiful wind up. I didn't. A lot of people ask me, they're like, oh, your business plan, whatever. Oh boy. I am a millennial who graduated at the height of the recession in 2009. I lived in South America, in Argentina, working in advertising at Young and Rubicam for almost a year and a half. And then I came back to Washington, D.C., where I'm from, and lasted about 5 months working at an agency. And I've been a freelance writer since I was about 18 years old. I've always had varying side hustles. So I left my job without having another job, which in retrospect was only someone who was like, 23 and clueless, would do. I had just a lot of balls, and I was always writing on the side and throwing parties and doing stuff. And so I started FinePoint now about like 9+ years ago. And I was doing more digital strategy. And then I became more of a public relations person, PR person people would hire. And I was always developing my own writing and speaking and television and stuff like that. And I became the go-to for individual representation, which meant that people in positions of power or just people that want to make names for themselves would come to me. And so I took FinePoint from more of a PR firm company to a leadership and professional development one, which is to say that, I help teach people how to be out there, whether that means they want a corporate board seat, or they want actual praise, very outwardly, whether it's speaking gigs or television, or whether it's within a company. And I, will train people in a company about asking for what they want, talking about their work. So when I was representing individuals, I started to realize that nobody knew how to talk about themselves or how to tout their work. And that was especially difficult for women. And so in 2013, I started speaking and training on bragging and why touting your accomplishments is essential. And Brag Better is not only for women. My demographic is what I call the qualified quiet, which are people that have done the work but don't know how to talk about it. So that's irrespective of gender, race, sexual identity, and irrespective of point in career. So I wrote this book. I've been working on this concept since about 2013. It's out June 16th, 2020 with Portfolio at Penguin Random House. And it's all about how to use PR to leverage, the skills of publicists to tout your work and ask for what you want and get recognition. And recognition can mean very different things for people, but to advance your career more or less.
You talked a little bit about that this is not just for women, it's also for men, but let's talk about women for a minute. Why do you think women have an issue actually talking about themselves?
Yeah, so before I started to do this, it was something I noticed when I was representing women in particular, but also I was watching the trajectory. So I'd have really young women that wanted to intern or work for me that had trouble, touting and bragging about their past background. And then I'd be in networking situations with friends or colleagues, contemporaries rather, and I'd hop in and play publicist. And then it was just, I was seeing it at the very, very high level where, nobody could brag about what they'd done, own their accomplishments, say, I did this, I did that. And, my thing is that bragging is about stating true facts, but it's a systemic problem that comes from, the oppression and suppression of women's voices, women, being in more positions of power than ever, and the difficulties that come with being a woman in public, being judged on metrics that men are not, positive attributes being associated with passive behaviors, particularly around voice. In the book, I talk about how, in the Odyssey, there's references to women shutting up. So it's this message of be quiet and shut up. And, women also either giving credit to other people or, we don't have a lot of role models for this. We don't have a vocabulary to talk positively about professional accomplishment, which is what Brag Better is that vocabulary that I've worked on and refined through exercises and being a writer and finding those words. But it's of zero surprise to me that this is difficult for women. People tell you to shut up. People tell you to do things in a million different contradictory ways. You're policed from your voice to your ankles, as I'm sure, Kara, you can attest to. And putting yourself out there is really scary. And there's real danger to being a woman in public, actual physical danger. And we don't have, the right words for it and the skills for it. And so that's what Brag Better aims to do for all of the qualified quiet, but specifically for women. And it's hard to be listened to as a woman. We listen to the default, voices of men, literally, a lot of scientific research. And so it's certainly not about getting men to shut up. I always want to be very, very clear about that. It's about getting men to echo the sentiments of women and voices of women and just everyone who's in a position of power and privilege to pass the mic to someone whose voice we might not hear. A huge part of Bragging Better is also uplifting the voices of everyone around you because there's space for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when people are talking about their accomplishments, so often they talk about where they worked, right? That is like a go-to, oh, well, I was, I was the founder of this, or I was the VP of this, or whatever. And I feel like that's not even necessarily what people are looking for out of that kind of question when they ask you, what have you accomplished? How do you help people kind of drill down on what those pieces are? How do they, if you're sitting at home and trying to figure out, in some ways, I feel like it's not just about your resume. It's really about what have you accomplished, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to be clear too, that you don't have to have founded a company to be able to brag. It's never about reinventing the wheel. I say this with my clients and I say it in the book. I say it to everyone. Everyone has things to brag about. It's not the what, it's the how you're delivering it. And so one thing too is, you have to tell people what you want. You have to tell people who you are over and over and over again in order to, advance to whatever you're trying to do. But sharing those accomplishments, humans grasp storytelling and your energy and what you're excited about. So when you're making an introduction, I talk a lot about the importance of introductions and saying, oh, I was a VP at X, Y, and Z, or you could say, oh, I was a VP at X, Y, and Z, and I led this big team and we just did this awesome project. Like if you're excited about it, then other people can also, if you're excited and you're bragging about what you've done, then other people can latch onto it and support you also. And yeah, I mean, titles and certain workplaces mean so many different things to so many different people. So talking about some of the things you've accomplished that you're proud of, but also that other people are able to understand. I mean, I think that's one thing that publicists do and other communications people is help sort of translate people's specialties and areas of expertise into things that anyone can grasp onto. That, if you're bragging this book is for professional use, but there are a lot of personal applications, and it's just about being proud of what you've done and realizing what you've done is enough and worthy of sharing and praise.
So do you think that when people are reading this, my take is it's not just about what you can say about yourself, but what you can get your publicist to say about you, what you can get. Is that accurate? I mean, it's not just about...
Well, so yeah, bragging better is about being able to talk positively about what the work you've done, but also being able to talk positively about the work of those around you. And a lot of this stems from also being in and around the media for a really long time, our really intense inverse relationship between volume and merit. And so we reward loud. And as much as I'd like to be optimistic and say that we can get the loud people to be quiet and listen, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think it's a matter of getting that qualified quiet to start talking. And it's scary and it's uncomfortable and you're worried people are going to call you obnoxious. And, I've worked on this idea for almost a decade. Like I understand what that means and why it's scary, but it's also, if you don't tell people what you do, like it's a huge part of doing the work. People have this idea that they'd rather put their head down and do the work than talk about it. But talking about your work is an essential part of work. I mean, Kara, with the brands that you run, like, you do a tremendous amount of work, but it's also how you talk about them and package them, like literally or, figuratively in showing people what you've accomplished in.
Totally.
And so I think that, at a sheer baseline, I care that we get better experts, particularly in media. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, no matter what industry you're in, you can probably think to yourself that you can think of someone in your subject area or your industry that gets all the praise, but is certainly either you've done more, or you know more. And I think that, people are worried about either bragging too much or I think that what the delineation there is really the self-awareness to be worried about those sorts of things. I just want everyone to start talking. If you know this stuff, I think in a year like 2020, in an election year, it's really also somewhat civic responsibility to if you know the stuff and have done the work, please start talking about it so that other people can be inspired and learn from you.
Well, I think, as you and I were talking, as we were getting on this podcast, we're taping it in the midst of the Corona crisis right now. And I think that there's no better time to start thinking about, like, how do people actually talk about what they've accomplished? Because I've even talked to some people who, have not lost their job, but are actually thinking about through this break that maybe they want to go out and do something else. So as you start thinking about what are all the things that you've accomplished, I think it's not just about what are the things that you've accomplished that you don't like, but that you also allow you to really view like what you ultimately want to do. So I think there's no better time for this as well.
I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, who on earth, can I swear on this podcast?
Yes.
Oh, who could have fucking predicted this? Virologists or whatever will be like, we did. But for us lay people that don't study viruses, so my book was postponed by a month. I'm thrilled it's coming out June 16th. We just made the best choice. And I my publisher has been incredible. It's a totally unprecedented time. It's a really scary time. And maybe this idea that I'm asking you to do something scary on top of a scary time, either maybe they'll cancel themselves out or you'll just do it anyway. But, we live in a really really uncertain time. I'm writing an extra chapter on how to brag better from home and how to brag better online, which will be free. And that will be released before the book comes out as soon as I finish it. And it will be, all of that will be readily available in any place you can find me, which we'll obviously get to later. But I really wanted that because I was like, oh no, like now people really need to communicate their value in their work, because you also can't get in front of someone's face. I mean, you and I are doing this over Zoom because also we live on opposite coasts, but so much of work or business is being able to be with people that it's totally, you're going to have to be even more outspoken about the work that you've done. And also because, I mean, I am insanely fortunate and privileged and be able to stay at home and all of those things. But the nature of work is going to shift. And so more than ever, you have to tell people what you need and what you want professionally in such a time of uncertainty as well.
It's really interesting topic too, because like, how do you do that through, this new world? I mean, whether it's, I guess Zoom is one aspect of it, but I'm also thinking about, how do you show up on LinkedIn? How do you show up on Twitter? All of these different, social media platforms. And do you need to show up on all of them either? I mean, I think that's a whole other topic, but how do you present yourself, right? Because I think in so many places, it's not about what your title is. It's really about, can people relate to you? Can people, sort of hear you through these platforms?
Titles, and I talk about this in the book, titles mean nothing, because especially since we're in an economy where so many people do their own thing, they just give themselves titles. And, one thing that I've done with clients, is they're a VP at a company, and it's actually an incredibly big deal to be a VP at wherever they are. But that means only other people who maybe work directly with them understand how big of a deal it is to be a VP at that company. So it is about communicating, projects you've led, value you've brought in for your company, what you're good at in your job. And so we're now in this extreme situation where we can't gather. And so your online presence and your consistency of presence of how you present yourself. So like, what are some things you can do right now? Because this is a lot of like big ideas. I want anyone listening to feel like they can, have tangible things. So let's start somewhere simple. I talk about all the time, which is your bio. So your bio is one of the ultimate, I would say like the ultimate bragging spots. And I see a lot of people miss it. I think that's one place where it is totally acceptable and encouraged to brag. Every award, every accomplishment, full kitchen sink. So one thing you can do right now online is make sure, first thing first, all of your bios are consistent across wherever. Mm-hmm. If a conference booker or a recruiter or someone can't figure out who you are and what you've done in a cohesive package in a short amount of time, then they will move on to someone who's better packaged, which that person might be way less qualified than you. So I tell people to do a quarterly calendar reminder to update their bio, keep it in one Google document or OneNote or whatever you use. And everyone needs a long, a short, and a 2-line bio. Long bio, kitchen sink, everything. I want every award. I want you to remove like silly, fun references. I don't see the bio changing in terms of like something that all professionals have and need. If it's something quirky that relates to your business or relates to your brand, then that's fine. But otherwise I would kill it. And then a short bio, paragraph, 2-line bio goes on all your social media. I think that's like a great place to just start. And if you're having trouble, thinking about things you've done, ask people close to you to jog your memory or people you've worked with, and do it every quarter so that it's not, you don't have to go back every 2 years. Like Kara, like you're always, winning awards or on X, Y, and Z lists. Like I would want you to, and I'm sure you keep a running tally of all of that so that it can be presented. Like the keys to presenting yourself and the keys to getting people to listen are repetition and consistency. So like those are the 2 cornerstones right now, I would say, are repetition and consistency. I
love that. So 2 ways to get people to listen: repetition and consistency.
Yeah, that's good. I'm writing it down.
I love it. So in the book, Brag Better, you talk about a technique that helps people get past anxiety. Can you give us a little preview of that? And what
of
are people
course.
to learn by
Of course. I know I want to do like story time and just start reading my book to people, but I feel like my publisher might have a problem with that. Yeah. So first of all, blanket, you're so not alone in your discomfort with these feelings that this is what I do for a living. If it were easy, if everyone was good at it, I wouldn't have a job. And we also have this mixed up idea that you should know how to do these things, maybe because it falls along soft skills or whatever you want to, call it. But you should know how to do these things. And I have spoken to thousands of people, and there are two people I can think of, maybe one in the thousands I've spoken to about this concept over the past decade, that have said to me, oh, I'm fine. Everyone else is like, oh, I'm so bad at that. And like household names, like, oh my God, I'm so bad at that. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's okay. Like what I'm teaching is not rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's much harder is taking the time to put in the work, get the degrees, make sure you know your stuff, which you definitely do if you identify with the qualified quiet, which I would say most of us are to some degree. So it's a learned skill set, and it's scary and it's hard, but it is about dipping a toe in. So, I hope that the whole thing reduces anxiety. When you're doing new hard things, they often create anxiety, and it's scary to put yourself out there. But I would say, one thing I really cared about with Brag Better was it wasn't just sentiment. I care that you feel better, but I also these are all deeply tangible skill sets and, techniques and, things that you can do. So one small thing, depending on where you are, whether it's, I'll use an extreme example, but I talk in the book about how I counseled a whole firm, and there were a bunch of junior members, and one in particular, she needed to speak up more in meetings. So whether that is genuinely, and not all of this is for entrepreneurs, we're entrepreneurs and, know how to ask for certain things, but if you're in a larger organization, maybe it's writing down one question to contribute to the all hands meeting or, your pods meeting once a week, and being able to raise your hand and do it. It can be a very small action. I'm not asking you to go on TV. I'm asking you to at least just, even if you say to your coworker at the end of the week, hey, I'm really proud of that, X, Y, and Z call I had with the client. I think it went really well. Even that interpersonally. And then starting to brag better for others, saying to that coworker, hey, I noticed you really killed that presentation. I'd love to, tell our boss about it if you need me to, or, there's so much we can do together that's really important as well. So, in terms of the anxiety factor, I understand it. This will go into why it feels it feels anxiety provoking. It all makes complete sense. The anxiety is incredibly normal with all of these activities. That's why I do this. That's why I wrote this book. So I think one thing that alleviates it though is everyone feels scared about this. It's pretty universal. And even people that are on TV all the time or speaking all the time will tell you they still get nervous. I want to throw up at the beginning of every speech, but I still get on a plane and do the speech. At this point, you've given so many speeches, Kara, and done so much TV and all of those things. But I mean, it's still to some degree, you get probably a little bit because you give a shit.
Well, it's interesting. I always tell people that, I was always a very social person, but and much to many people's surprise, and maybe as I looked deeply at myself, I was really afraid of public speaking. And I think for me, it, touches on many things that you talk about in this book too, but it was just my own, probably confidence somewhere in there too, that I just thought I'm on stage, I'm in front of these people and I'm being judged in some way. And so I finally decided that I would do a talk. And what's interesting, the thing that I never really knew was the issue that I was most afraid of was following a deck. That was the thing for me that was just and again, I used to think that it actually was about public speaking, but it was really less about that. It was more about
I don't use decks at all.
Right. And so it was interesting because I did a deck for the first kind of big talk that I did. And then I got called, there was somebody in the audience and they saw me speak and they reached out and they wanted me to do this presentation. And I said, I just don't really have time to kind of prepare. And it's a little bit different than the presentation that you saw me give. And they said, oh, well, there's no decks. And I said, wait, what? Like there's no deck. And so part of it really terrified me. But then the other part of me, I thought, well, okay, well, there's no deck. So I'll just get up there and go do it. And like you said, I mean, I felt super nauseous, like right before I got up there and did it. And it was my best talk, because what I realized about me was that, and I think this is really true for, lots of people, but I'm good at reading audiences. And so when I would get up, and no matter how much people had prepared me about who I was going to be speaking to, whether that was, a group of tech people, a group of, at-home mothers, like whatever it was, they really didn't get the same kind of perception that I got from, that audience. And so what I really felt like was the key thing was that, I had to have the ability to change a little bit once I got up there. And if I had this thing written in stone, it was really, really hard for me. So by the third time I got called to do a presentation, I said, well, I don't really have time to do a deck. So would it be okay if I did it without a deck? And they said, oh no, we actually need a deck. And I said, the only way that I'll be able to do it is, because I have a full-time job as a CEO, is to actually do it without the deck. And they said, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes. And then after that, the conference, now they don't do decks at all, because they were like, it was so much better. It was real. It was like,
decks make me, I don't speak with decks for a similar reason, but also it's just like so much extra consideration. I get like, I am very savvy, but I'm very, very technologically challenged. So I will fuck it up. I guess I'll have like one slide, because they're like, oh, do you need AV? I'm like, no, I never need AV. But I give out paper handouts. I mean, that sort of stuff is more memorable to me than looking at a deck. Like, I've never sat at a talk and been like, man, what really made that person's speech? That deck. Like, no, it never did. True. If anything, everyone's distracted looking at this deck of like, people look at the deck, not the speaker. So, I mean, there are situations where decks are required, and then I will get my clicker and deal with it. But, I talk a lot about public speaking in the book, and a fear of public speaking is more common than a fear of death. And Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet, talks about her like crippling fear of public speaking. For me, I avoided it for a really long time until someone wanted to pay me a chunk of money. And I was like, oh, now I got to figure this out. So I got a speaking coach, and she helped me. And, now, I used to noodle for days, and now I'm like, oh, sorry, when am I speaking in? What is it? Like, here we go. Like, but the preparation really matters, that part. Like, it's easy to put it off, but that stuff is scary, and it requires practice and time and energy, and everyone's scared by it. Like, for someone to hear that like you would be, freaked out or whatever, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, she runs this, like, so these universal feelings that we don't acknowledge, we're all in them together.
Well, and I think
it's the theme of everything right now.
What I learned through that too is that, and you have a great quote that I read out there somewhere: if it's a great opportunity, you'll figure it out. I think that if you actually go and do that and figure it out, you may learn something about yourself. For example, like you may learn, and talk in really sitting down with Brad better, but potentially also going to some of your events that you host, that there's other things about you that you didn't even think were necessarily things that you wanted to brag about, right? Or should brag about. And I think that's the key. That's the key thing. I love it. Well,
and something you can do that's easy too is, I tell people to, like, here's another quick action you can do. Email 5 people, a colleague, someone in your professional circle, a friend, a family member, a loose tie, someone you like sort of know through association, and like just someone you only know through social media, and ask all 5 of them to describe what you do. And if they're not similar, then it's also about thinking about how you're communicating your output, because it doesn't all have to come from you, because like a family member loves you and supports you, but oftentimes they don't know what you do, or a friend sees you as a friend and doesn't know what you do professionally, and like vice versa for someone who sees you professionally but not personally. And you want to be able to like sort of blend all those together so that everyone can understand your work and what you've done that's great, but also you can do some of that like sort of testing out in the world of like what you're putting out there, and there's so many people that can help you.
That's awesome. So I always ask people, what makes you unstoppable? And I think you've said a few things, but what would you say is what comes to mind? What makes Meredith unstoppable?
I would say my humor is one thing that makes me unstoppable.
I love that.
And then I guess just my like sheer force of will and desire to wear great secondhand clothing. So I gotta, work to be able to dress that in my dog and make her wear t-shirts, but they're not designer t-shirts. They're just. And
we were talking a little bit about this. So the other side of your business, you have a podcast on that whole topic. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I have a podcast called It Never Gets Old, a firsthand account of all things secondhand and sustainable. It stems from my ferociously buying and selling clothing secondhand for about 20 years or longer. And I have consistently made money on my wardrobe. I wear almost all designer clothing, 95% of which was owned by someone else first. And it is a multi-billion dollar industry that now I advise like VCs or other people in and around the area. It's going to be a $24 billion business by, I think they're saying 2022. And Gen Z really, really gives a shit about the climate, and it's the most sustainable option is wearing stuff that already exists. So whether it's, a deep dive on Chanel or about thrifting, it's just a really, really fun world and hobby for me that, talking about one thing, like sometimes we don't acknowledge things we're really good at because we see them as not work necessarily. And forever, I just sort of was like, oh yeah, I have this insane well of knowledge about secondhand, like a, not photographic memory is wrong, but like I just like have cataloged so much way more than the 10,000 hours on this stuff. So it's been really, really fun to share. And it's obviously different from the brag better topic, but something that's fun and interesting and good for the planet.
I love it. I love it. So where can people find you, Meredith?
Yes. So you can find me everywhere at Meredith Fineman on all the social medias. And please order Brag Better. If you go to brag-better.com, you can order it from the big guy or one of your local bookstores. Audiobook, just finished recording, Kindle, skywriting version, however you can get it to you. And I really hope you like it. I interviewed so many people in this book with many, many different points of view, whether that's, gender, age, level of seniority, ability, sexuality, all of those things. Just really, I care to, the most important thing to leave people with is just to pass the mic when someone listens to you, then use that to help someone else get listened to as well.
I love that. I love that. So this is really, really awesome. Very last question, favorite and flavor.
I remember there was one summer when I lived in so this was before I knew you.
Yeah.
And I remember when I think I've known you for 7. I need to look at the emails, but I want to say it's 6 or 7 years.
I think that's right.
And I remember the first time I ever saw Hint, I was living in New York and I was like, this is watermelon water.
Watermelon's great. It's amazing.
And then I went back and bought another one. And then that whole summer, it was a particularly hot summer in New York City. And I just drank the watermelon Hints. So that was before I knew you. And then I remember I was like, oh my God, she's that watermelon water lady.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, well, this is awesome. I'm so excited for your book. And don't forget to pre-order brag-better.com, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
or
then
just Google the
also
Brag
on
Better.
Amazon as well, right?
Yes. Yes. So brag, I always have to say brag-better because bragbetter.com, I think I didn't spring for, which at this point I should fucking spring for it. But that has also more about the book, more about me, snippets of content, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. I'm so excited. So very, very excited. So congratulations, and everybody get on and start ordering and learn how to brag better. Thanks so much, Meredith.
Thank you so much, Kara.
Yeah, thanks. If you like what you heard, please help spread the word and leave us a review. You can also follow along with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Kara Goldin. Do you have a question for me or want to nominate an innovator to spotlight? Please talk to me at Kara Goldin on Twitter. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, be unstoppable.